Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lois Arthur, and on behalf of the search committee, I'm here we are all here for the forum, today's forum, with Patricia Okker. Patricia Okker earned an MA with distinction from the University of Georgia in 1985 and a PhD from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign in 1990. In 2003, she was awarded a William T. Kemper Fellowship for Teaching Excellence, the University of Missouri's most prestigious teaching award. Professor Okker was promoted to full professor of English at the University of Missouri in 2004 and served as chair of that department from 2005 to 2011. She is currently a faculty fellow in the University of Missouri's Office of the Provost. Professor Okker will open the forum with remarks on the unique value of a liberal arts education at a Research One university, followed by a time for questions from the audience. If you please pass those cards to the aisles, one of my colleagues will pick them up and bring them forward. In her interview with the search committee, Professor Okker said with a great deal of optimism and conviction that as dean, she would aspire to position CLAS at the University of Iowa among the very best of the best colleges of liberal arts and sciences in the country. Now please join me in welcoming Professor Patricia Okker.
Thank you very much. I'm really delighted to be here, and thank you for joining me. Is everything okay? You can hear me? Good. Holler if you can at some point. And I'm particularly excited about the topic today because I think it's not only very important, but it's also a particularly timely topic about the role of liberal arts and science education in a Research One university. And I say that because we're bombarded really with stories about the liberal arts which I actually want to critique a bit today, which are stories that our values are outdated and not relevant, and that we're in a state of crisis, or we're on the brink, and it doesn't matter if you look at headlines or book titles, but there certainly is a sense, I think, for many of us in colleges of liberal arts and sciences of feeling under attack. And so the story that I want to offer today is actually one of, it's a very different story, and it's a much more optimistic story, but it's one grounded in reality, I hope that you'll see. So my basic story, I think, that I want to share with you today and give some examples is that I think that there are extraordinary opportunities for liberal arts and sciences today, and that although we sometimes think of research and teaching and learning as in tension with one another because research focuses on depth of learning and research, and liberal arts we tend to think of it breadth, and so I think sometimes we think of these things as existing in tension. In fact, what I want to argue today is that the very unique culture of R1 University greatly enhances a liberal arts education, and so I'm going to talk about that today briefly. What I want to do, though, is start by very briefly describing what I mean by a liberal arts education, because for one thing I need to identify, just to acknowledge that there's a bit of shorthand here, because there's a whole lot, when we say liberal arts, the humanities aren't mentioned, social sciences and sciences. And that phrase, liberal arts, sometimes I'll say liberal arts and sciences, but when I talk about the liberal arts, I am talking about the full range of disciplines that are in this particular college. And very briefly, so what are some core values? And I think there are different ways of framing this, and so maybe in question and answer we might have some debate about this. But I want to just quickly identify 4 things which I think are core to what we do in liberal arts and sciences. So, and this would be true of both graduate and undergraduate, but development of critical thinking and analytical skills. Probably critical thinking we'd put more on the undergraduate, but certainly at the graduate level we think about developing student skills in quantitative and qualitative analysis, and that the habits of mind that we associate with our discipline. Communication skills are also key. Traditionally, that's defined in terms of speaking and writing. I also would include visual communication here, as our culture is increasingly visually oriented. And again, I think that we sometimes think of that as something that maybe communication skills is primarily maybe people in the humanities, but certainly as I look around, even as an English professor, to look at some of the funding imperatives in the sciences of NASA or NSF, the extent to which scientists are called on to have broad public appeal, to explain science to the public, to inspire young people, and, an educational component. And so all of us, I think, are charged with developing these communication skills. Two other core values that I think will frame my comments later on is one is just an appreciation and comfort level with complexity. So we ask students to think about things from different perspectives, to think about things from global or multicultural, historical, theoretical perspectives. But we want students to wrestle with big ideas, I think, regardless of what discipline we're in. And finally, I think there's a real sense throughout a college like this of a sense of civic engagement, of a necessity for solving big problems, of addressing fundamental human needs and wants and desires. And that's certainly rooted in a historical reality of the American public higher ed, about the foundation of public universities. So all of those, I think, I'll touch on those throughout my comments today. So to get to the real question, though, what are the unique values, the unique features of a Research One institution that enhance a liberal arts education? And one is that I would say that research universities are ones where the transmission of knowledge and the creation of new knowledge occur in the same place. And that is not, well, it is an extraordinarily powerful engine for innovation and change. And certainly as a priority that I would have as dean is to do all I could to encourage what I know is going on here, of strengthening that link between the research part of our mission and the teaching side. So to make the transmission of knowledge and the creation of new knowledge and creative activities, to put those in conversation with one another. So how do we do that? There are lots of ways, and I've so enjoyed my conversations today, and have wonderful, even more appreciation for the things that you're doing here. But one way that we can do that I'd like to just explore a little bit is of getting more undergraduates involved in research and creative activities here on campus. Again, there's lots of good evidence to suggest that that's already going on, but there's always ways of getting more students involved. So just to highlight a few of the things that I've seen, I'm excited to learn more about the Iowa Center for Research by Undergraduates. I've heard already about undergraduates being very active in laboratories. I had a wonderful lunch with the students. I'll talk a little bit about that at the very end. In some disciplines, this comes in primarily in one-on-one relationships with faculty members. And so there are lots of opportunities, sometimes in one-on-one relationships, sometimes collaboratively, of getting undergraduate students involved in the research mission. So some new ideas, and again, maybe some of this is going on, but some things that I think those are more traditional ways of doing this, some new ways of again, strengthening this connection between research and teaching. Students in many disciplines in a college like CLAS write original research papers. It doesn't often feel like, at least my experience, it doesn't feel like research because the only person reading it is the person grading it. And the actually transmission of knowledge means you're getting your ideas out. And so one of the things I'm interested in, ways that we can use new technologies for having students have an opportunity to publish their work in, whether it's blogs or online forum or various means of using new technologies, so that we can have students participating in the transmission of their ideas, in designing courses and so forth in that way. Another example that I give, and this isn't research in a traditional way, but I found it to be a powerful one. Just recently I finished teaching a collaborative internship class. And it was, again, it's not traditional research, but it was, I think my students would argue that they were creating new knowledge, and they certainly had that experience of sharing their work outside the university. So I won't get too detailed here. But what the students did is I took students to Hallmark in Kansas City, which is a big employer in our state, in Missouri, and they were given a specific project. And it was a pretty sophisticated one. They were asked to think about ways in which Hallmark can address the needs of young people of their age for saving memories, that Hallmark was interested in. How do you save memories? What do you want to save? What are your artifacts? And because they say, well, we have, text messages and phone messages, and Hallmark is interested in how do you save those things, and what would it look like? And so my students really had to think about pretty complicated ideas about memory and nostalgia and all kinds of things. And then they went back to, they spent several weeks working on this project, then they went back to Hallmark and presented their findings. And just the sense, I think, again, it's not research, but I would argue that it was a creation of new knowledge in a way, gave them an opportunity of presenting their work outside the university. And I just offer that as one. Now, one of the challenges, and I suspect this might come up during the question and answer time as well, is that getting undergraduate students involved in research and creative activities is very labor intensive. And it really does speak to the need in this college, which all of you are aware of the need for more tenured and tenure track faculty in this college. So some of you have heard this before. I'll just be brief here. But in doing some research on the college, one of the things that I was struck by was that the ratio of students to faculty here in this college is really quite outside some of the peer institutions. So for instance, at Virginia and Indiana, the ratio is about 13 or 14 to 1 within the college. At Illinois, it's 21 to 1. And again, I apologize if this is information all of you already know. At Iowa, it's over 30 to 1. Well, it's going to be hard to address that desire to have more intensive, high-impact experiences with faculty without more faculty. So, how to solve that is quite another issue. But, I want to acknowledge that I'm aware of the challenges facing this college. So this connection between research and teaching is one feature that I think is unique about a liberal arts education at a Research One. Another one is the extraordinary interdisciplinary opportunities that are available here. And what I mean by that are both opportunities within the college and also collaborations with other colleges on campus. We hear a lot in the news. The most recent one is how we're going to save the business students need a liberal arts education. And so there's all these new collaborations. I forget, it was something in Chronicle or Inside Higher Ed about new efforts to get business students more engaged in a liberal arts education. I think that's very good. My model is a little bit differently because the way in which at least it's been described is that's one where a college like CLAS serves the needs of others. And I'm more interested in something that is mutually beneficial. So again, I want to emphasize the things that actually have excited me about my interest in this position of things that I've seen here. The cluster initiatives, which is incredibly exciting, and I'm really eager to learn more about that. The Obermann Center, the many interdisciplinary centers that already exist within the college. And I want to thank Ed Folsom. I don't know where he is, but I want to thank him for suggesting that I look into the wonderful collaboration and Sounds of Space and the Kronos Quartet. It was just, I was thrilled to see that. And that's the kind of example of what can happen at a Research One university of having that kind of interdisciplinary projects. So that's something that not all institutions of higher learning can do, even if they're focused on the liberal arts. As dean, I certainly would want to strengthen the ones that already exist, support the ones that exist, and look for new opportunities for enhancing this interdisciplinary culture. And I have some experience. We've been working, I won't give too much here, but on my own campus, I've been leading a group of faculty develop a new major in digital storytelling that brings together faculty and courses from 6 different colleges and schools across the campus. And the idea is to combine expertise in the liberal arts and writing with production skills, primarily audio and video, and also aesthetic skills and design skills. And so to have students prepared to tell stories in multimedia environments. And that's just an example. Again, I'm not saying that that's the vision, but that's the kind of work that I've done and would be interested in promoting here at Iowa. Another thing that I'm interested in seeing, again, there already are examples. I'd love to hear of them, but I think nationally, we can do more about thinking about interdisciplinary team-taught classes that could be developed, to address state and local needs. And I just did some, brainstorming about what might some of those look like. So maybe a class where students from the geosciences and students from law and political science might come together to work on some specific issues about legal or policy issues about climate change, for instance. or students from the arts and business working together to develop new models for fiscally sustainable community arts programs. Or another one of having a course where students from the Division of World Languages, Health and Human Physiology, Nursing, Public Health, and you could actually expand that, to develop culturally specific interventions for some issue of public health. And the idea here is to have those interdisciplinary courses exist where we would have students from multiple disciplines all working together in one particular course. So the third and the last unique feature about liberal arts education, liberal arts and science education here at Research One universities that I want to emphasize focuses on the explicit service mission of most research universities, particularly public universities. So the notion that the university has an important role and has a role of serving the state, of course, is as old as the university itself. And I was, in part because I'm a literary history person and I just like history, I did enjoy learning a bit about your own history and about the General Assembly's authorizing of the university in 1847 and how that was tied specifically to needs of developing an educated workforce. And when I traced that, I wanted to do a little bit of, how has that been played out, how has that idea played out over time? I was particularly struck by the story of your 8th president, George McLean, if I'm pronouncing that right, who was from, again, what I understand is, there might be historians here who have much more detail about this than I do, who was the first president to really emphasize research in the university and also founded the Graduate College, which is an interesting combination, I think. And because I study 19th century periodicals and I love digital archives, I couldn't resist the opportunity to look up some old newspapers, and I found his inaugural address in 1899. And I'm struck by how he understood that connection between research, teaching, and service. So this is what he said. I'll quote from his 1899 inaugural address. He says, "The first obligations of the new university are to the nation and the state. It must serve them as they call for scholars and scientists to solve modern problems." And then he went on to very specifically tie that to not only teaching, but pursuing what he called original research. And he talked about faculty members in all disciplines as investigators of this emphasis of new knowledge. And I really could hear a president using that same language today. And for me, it really emphasizes this very strong connection between research, teaching, and service. In colleges of liberal arts and sciences, I think we sometimes struggle, at least on my own campus, maybe it's different here, but I think we sometimes struggle with this notion about service. Current language is often about economic development, and I know many faculty who, with some valid reasons, have some concerns about this emphasis on economic development, that it's kind of undercutting our core values and emphasizing something that is short-term practical rather than a long-term development of an educated populace or an educated person. And I recognize those concerns and I understand them, but I actually have a different view of this emphasis on economic development and service. And I see it actually as a really unique opportunity for colleges of liberal arts and sciences to gain some traction in the public and to do it in a way that actually is consistent and honors our core values rather than undercutting them. And just as evidence for that, I'll just refer to there's a National Association of Colleges and Employers, which does a national survey each year of what employers are looking for. And from what you hear in the press, you would think that it's all these very practical things that other colleges do rather than a college of liberal arts and sciences. But the list are things that we do extraordinarily well. So ability to work in a team. I mean, I heard students talking about laboratories at lunchtime. I've seen all kinds of evidence about collaborative work going on in the arts as well, musical ensembles. There's plenty of collaborative work going on in the college. Verbal communication skills, ability to make decisions and solve problems, ability to obtain and process information, ability to plan, organize, and prioritize work. Those are their top 5. Now, I would argue we do all of those, and we do them extremely well. And what strikes me is not only do we do that in our teaching, but that's our research mission. So the what we can offer students in terms of the links of having access to a research mission is incredibly practical. It is also idealistic, and perhaps because I'm comfortable of dealing with both of those at the same time. That's the position. I'm not saying it's only because it's practical, but I want to emphasize the practical benefits of a liberal arts education to our students. So I want to end today actually with an anecdote about a particular class that I teach. Apologies to the people in the English department who have already heard this. So I regularly teach a class that asks, it's basically a career exploration course for English majors, and it basically prepares students for life after college. And the basic premise of the course is that I want them to use their skills in research and writing to learn about particular careers and to gain confidence in the skills to be able to articulate the strengths that they have as English majors and students in the liberal arts. So I start the class, I ask them the very first day to we write on the board all the things that they've learned as English majors and as students in the College of Liberal Arts and Science. And so they do things like, well, I learned another language, and I learned how to read and write, and I'm really good at publicly and in a civic way having disagreements, because in English classes somebody interprets a poem one way and somebody interprets it another way, and so we have conversations every day about difference of opinion. And then so we fill up the board of all these different things, and then I ask the students, and of course this is the hook that gets me through the rest of the class, is I ask them, I say, all right, let's erase the things that are not transferable in a professional setting. And there's a pause. And of course, we've never erased anything. And it really does speak to this, that they didn't become English majors because they're going to get jobs. They became English majors because they loved English. But they have developed skills that are highly practical, and that's what the hook is for the class. So however anecdotal that story is, I think it does attest to the kind of thing that I would emphasize, certainly as dean of this college, is the links between teaching, research, and service. And so whatever specific priorities I would emphasize about internal and external partnerships, or interdisciplinary projects, or increasing the number of students in high-impact experiences, all of those, I would argue, would be grounded on the same foundation that the best way to meet the needs of our state and the students and the nation is to emphasize the unique things that we can do here at research universities. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to take questions.
Our first question is, how much autonomy do you think departments should be allowed?
Autonomy. Well, that's a broad topic. So let me flesh out some areas and give some examples of that. So I think that it's important for the college to have alignment with overall strategic goals. So complete autonomy seems too much. And it's not that the individual directions wouldn't be bad, but to move forward as a college, some alignment of priorities is absolutely important. On the other hand, so it's a balance, it's somewhere in the middle. On the other hand, there are many ways in which autonomy is absolutely central to how we understand how a university works. And I'll give an example, so I'm not talking in abstraction here. In my job as faculty fellow, so I'll make it specific, I'm all over campus doing program reviews. So I'm in occupational therapy in the morning, forestry middle of the day, and art history in the afternoon. So I see a wide range of disciplines. And one of the things clearly I learned right away is I cannot walk in there with my assumptions as an English professor of what service looks like, of what research looks like, that those fundamental understandings of what faculty do in those disciplines, that has to be grounded in the specific disciplines. And so in those areas, I think it's extraordinarily important that faculty in context of disciplines larger nationally have guidelines of this is how we understand research, this is the kind of research we do, this is whether external funding is or isn't central to what we do, or what service looks like, whether it's to the state or how it looks like. So I think it's a balance. I don't know how else to answer that, but some strategic alignment about priorities, but also having a dean who can advocate for the uniqueness of different departments is absolutely essential.
As the dean, how do you envision advocating for and collaborating with graduate students as researchers and teachers, especially in a financial climate where TA lines and research funding are perpetually under threat?
Yeah, I had a really fascinating discussion with the graduate students today, this afternoon, and these same issues came up. And so one is I have to learn about the budget of how TA lines are funded, and I know that there's wide variation across the college. So all of my comments, I would have to say, is framed in a context where I don't have details yet about how budget. I know how to work a budget, and but you really do have to get into the details. So some things that came up in our conversation of working with graduate students, of talking with the graduate students that I'd emphasize. One is, perhaps they saw a need anyway of increased collaboration or clarity about the role of the college and the role of the graduate college. And so and again, I'm hearing this from them and saying these are important issues. What the right solution is, it's premature for me to say. But they felt some tension, and not tension between the individual people, but not sure of which college they belong to. And that seemed like something that I think could address. The other thing that I emphasized is I see graduate students are absolutely central to the research mission of the university. One, it's because they're always bringing in new ideas, but when we talk about innovation and change, that can't happen without graduate students. So they're absolutely central to the mission. And in the comments that I had with the undergraduates today, it was really interesting because I asked them whether they thought it was an advantage having graduate students on campus. And they were absolutely clear that it absolutely was an advantage. And I thought that was a really spectacular thing. I don't know that I'd get that same answer. Maybe it was the students that were in the room at the time. But they really felt that as a powerful thing. Now, protecting the lines and finding the budget for it, that's absolutely is the challenge there.
With so many initiatives and so much policy coming from university-wide administration, how do you maintain the relevance of CLAS as a unit? What is the unique voice of CLAS within the university?
Could you repeat just the end of that? What is the
unique voice of CLAS within the university?
Well, certainly as the voice of the liberal arts education, it's, that is the unique value. And again, it's the wide range here. But I also would say that I guess I certainly want to advocate for that unique position, but also want to seek opportunities of collaborating with other colleges. It is something that I'm interested in doing, of finding collaboration. So it's not CLAS, and I'm not suggesting that it is this way, but at some campuses I certainly do see this, where CLAS, a college like this, exists in isolation without really much connection. And my vision is one that it's much more integrated with the other colleges and professional schools. So yes, it is unique in its role of certainly its size and scope. And I have heard from many people outside of the college that view is widely understood, that CLAS is unique in that way of certainly being home to the majority of undergraduate majors and emphasizing the liberal arts education, which is central to all of the schools and colleges. But I'd also really be interested in looking for connections with and collaborations with other colleges and schools.
How will you ensure that enthusiasm for digital work does not undercut work in less glamorous but equally essential non-digital media?
Well, I think anytime we have something new, sometimes it gets more attention but it's not going to be new forever. And so, so one is that we just absolutely have to keep the priority of what's new and exciting in all different arenas. But actually, I'm going to give an example here. And I'm a 19th century Americanist, so I know about the Walt Whitman archive. And I'll share a story and hope not to embarrass Ed in the process, which is the very first time I heard anything about digital humanities. I still remember it was at an academic American Lit conference. And what I was struck by, and it was students who were working on the Walt Whitman archive, is that they had all these things that I didn't understand about. Well, I still don't know all the details, so I can't really describe it. But the technology part was very exciting. But what was absolutely the most exciting part of it to me was that how much students understood really old-fashioned notions about literary scholarship. So they were doing all this complicated stuff and putting stuff up on the web, but they had a much greater appreciation for scholarly editing than any graduate students I had ever seen, because that was really seen as old-fashioned. So one of the things that I would say about that is I actually think that some of the digital projects challenge notions of what's new and old-fashioned. So in some ways, that work on digital humanities was the most old-fashioned stuff I had ever seen. It was so exciting in that way. And it was also really new. And so I don't think it's, for me, it is not so simple as what is new and what is old. It's, one is everything's going to have, maybe in the public eye, and some things will get more attention, but we're in this for the long haul. Colleges of Arts and, this is not a short-term thing. So that part doesn't make me nervous. We have to be mindful of that, certainly.
One worry some have with the emphasis on disciplinarity and cluster hires is that this may have the effect of taking resources and strengths from the core disciplines and departments, upon which even collaborative work depends so heavily. What do you think about the importance of the traditional disciplines and this worry of diluting or weakening the foundations of CLAS?
You cannot have interdisciplinary work without disciplinary work. It's just not possible. So I understand that concern. There are lots of ways of addressing that. My understanding is tenure homes are in traditional departments, so people are still connected. People have been doing interdisciplinary work for a very long time, and we've figured out some of these issues along the way, so those aren't new. But I am a supportive. We have a project called Mizzou Advantage on my campus of 4 interdisciplinary initiatives, and this issue has absolutely come up of some people saying, the resources are going into these new areas rather than traditional areas. But in fact, when the new hires, and our actually initiative focuses less on hiring than your cluster initiatives, but those faculty members are contributing in the traditional disciplines. They are they really have had incredible impact in the disciplines. So I just see these as complementary, and I don't see it as anything particularly new. I think we're thinking about new structures of doing it, but I'm not. You cannot have. I can't say it enough. You cannot have interdisciplinary work without really strong foundations in the disciplines. And so we need to, in terms of graduate education, we need to train students within the disciplines. And I also think we have to give them opportunities for doing interdisciplinary work. But if you think about it from a theoretical perspective, if you only did interdisciplinary work, then that would become a discipline, wouldn't it? If it was, if you said, whatever that issue, make up some, I don't want to pick on any one interdisciplinary issue, but if everybody comes and everybody does exactly the same thing, then it's no longer interdisciplinary, which is why it's absolutely essential that people still have grounding in traditional disciplines. So I see it as a win-win.
Suppose one of our faculty becomes a target of political attack because of their research. What do you do?
Well, this is a teachable moment, and I don't mean for the faculty member. This is a job of deans and provosts and presidents of and explaining and the basic principles of why freedom of, academic freedom is essential to the pursuit of knowledge, why it is the foundation of a university. And even when it's things that people might disagree with or not understand, it is central to what we do. And disagreements are perfectly appropriate, but this will never go away. So I don't think it's our particular climate. I think these issues always come up. And so you talk about the importance of the research itself as a mission, and you say it, and then the next time the crisis comes, you say it again. Or you say it in between times about the importance. So you can't say that enough. You constantly have to explain what that is. And I don't mean that in a way of being dismissive to the questions. I think it's perfectly reasonable for people to say, this sounds, I don't agree with this. That's perfectly appropriate. I am very comfortable with disagreement and debate. And it's a dean's job and a provost's job and a president's job to defend that principles and put that in a context. And you do it and you keep doing it.
A student's life after college will increasingly take place in a global environment. Beyond study abroad, how would you ensure that the on-campus curriculum is internationalized so that students have the knowledge, skills, and values that they will need to succeed in the 21st century?
That's a good question. I mean, these are all good questions. I didn't mean to pick on that one. Maybe I meant this is an easier one for me. So study abroad is important. And I want to say a couple things about study abroad because there's all different kinds of study abroad. And so we want to encourage generally study abroad, and I will get to other things. But there's sometimes very short-term study abroad experiences where students go with a group of U.S. students, and it's more a tour. And those are valuable experiences. It's not the same thing as going and living in a country and taking courses with students in that country. And so I want to recognize and encourage the full range of study abroad experiences for students. And again, if your only chance of doing study abroad is to do a short term where you're going with a group of American students, it's better than not doing anything. But we also want to do as much as we can to have full immersion experiences. So that's one. Another is to really look at the curriculum. So, and this is very specific to different disciplines, but are there places, and I would absolutely have to rely on the faculty here to tell me are there places in the curriculum where we have opportunities for developing new courses that would address those needs. So I don't want to oversell using my own examples, but in my own department, we have a strong African diaspora studies program, but we knew that one of the things we didn't have was a Caribbeanist, and budget was really tight, but we really made it a priority to hire a Caribbeanist because it was essential to our understanding of African diaspora. That you couldn't really say you have African diaspora without having somebody who could someone who is a Caribbeanist. So it's hiring faculty. It's also hiring other ways of attracting. The campus is internationalized by the fact that students, graduate students particularly, from around the world are attracted to the resources that you have on a campus like this. So continuing to attract international students both at the graduate and the undergraduate to campus is an important part. Again, it's not the same thing as going to live in another country for a year, but it is a piece, and you just keep putting all these pieces together. And finally, and I did have a conversation with one colleague about this in one of my meetings today, and I am aware of the financial challenges, but language instruction is absolutely crucial. I know that there's some people, there's been some calls that we don't need to have foreign language instruction anymore because everybody knows English. And that person who said that has not traveled much. And this is a subject which is near and dear to my heart, as I shared with some of you earlier today. But doing all we can, and we have to be creative about the financial realities of that, because not every university cannot offer all languages, but I am a big proponent of language instruction, and I just have to be honest, that is part of who I am as a scholar. My own work, I do work in American literature that's published in languages other than English. So that's a piece. It's not the only piece. You got to put all the pieces together, and there's probably some other pieces that you recognize. But for me, I would absolutely take a multifaceted approach to internationalization.
What in your past experience do you feel provides you with an understanding of the scientific disciplines? If none, what would you gain? How would you gain this understanding?
So my work as two things in terms of past experience, which I don't know I would say, well, it prepares me in a certain way. So one is the English department that I chaired for 6 years was what we called kind of a Big Tent approach to English studies. So it was quite diverse. We had folklorists and linguists and creative writing and British and American literature, and I'm leaving some groups out, no doubt. So in any one year, I had faculty with funding from NSF, National Endowment for the Arts, and National Endowment for the Humanities. So even within that, there was some range. So, and that's not the same as the diversity of this college. So I use that as an example, not of I've got it fine, but I have a faculty member who's, as a linguist, who studies theoretical implications of word order in Bantu languages. I'm a 19th century American scholar. This is not, and apologies to the linguists here, maybe somebody can help me on this one, but clearly as a department chair, I had to extend beyond what was in my comfort zone as a department chair. There are really very specific strategies for doing that. One is you rely heavily on faculty in the area to provide a context. I'm getting, for promotion and tenure issues, and that's not the only place, but promotion and tenure issues, of getting external reviewers. And so one of the things I learned is I don't understand the theoretical implications of word order in Bantu languages. But I do know how to evaluate the quality of journals in the field of linguistics. I can look at acceptance rates, I can look at citation, and there's all sorts of ways in which I can say, okay, the specifics of this I may not understand, but I do know how to evaluate this in terms of scholarship. So that's one thing in terms of experience. Another thing that I would say is, again, I'll be brief here because I already referred to it, but my work as faculty fellow, I'm all over campus. And so I'm working with faculty members to develop a plan for where do you want to go, where do you want to take your department, and what do you, we work specifically on issues about student learning. And so I have to work with them and kind of facilitate a process where they have to think about what do you want students in your discipline to know and be able to do. I can facilitate the process. I can think about really thinking about structurally in terms of process, and I would use the same strategies, I think, as a dean of relying on experts. And so things like how to do a startup lab in the scientists, I would ask the DEO of chemistry to help me. You know, like there are people on this campus who know how to do this, or the VP for research, and so you have to use resources. So as a leader, I've always been fundamentally someone who seeks advice and consultation whenever possible. I can make decisions, but I'm looking for experts and people who have knowledge and experience in particular areas, and that's, for me, is one way of addressing a challenge which would face whoever the new dean is of the scope of this college. But those are particular experiences that I would bring, and I wouldn't expect to understand all the nuances of everyone's research, but I certainly would be able to, have to be able to articulate to alumni and donors, here's what's important about that. But that's a conversation I'd have with the individual faculty to say, help me explain your work to the public. And it's then the faculty members, like teach me. I'm trainable. And teach me, help me articulate that so that I can talk with donors and alumni about your work.
Is civic engagement a component of a faculty member's service or research? Do you see civic engagement as a valid basis for promotion and tenure?
Well, I haven't read your promotion guidelines, so I don't know how. I'd look at your existing documents. I don't know. I would say in most cases it is, I'll use my own example, and then I don't know if we can, do we have give and take, or is it mostly the question? It's okay. That's one where I might have to have a conversation about it. So It's not sufficient on my campus because we're evaluated on teaching, research, and service. And so in and of itself, is it sufficient? The answer on my campus would absolutely be no. And my guess is, as an AAU institution, that's always I'm guessing, and maybe some nods or shaking, don't say, that would be my guess that would be the same here. It's an important element, and different faculty members in maybe different disciplines would have different profiles about that. And again, some of that is discipline specific. I have learned a lot this year about what service means, wildly different things in different parts of the campus. And my guess is it looks wildly different even within this college. But it probably is not sufficient in and of itself. But I would be open to what your documents say about how you evaluate tenure.
What do you see as the optimum associate dean structure in your class? How would you align duties?
I have heard so much about this today. I do not believe there is an optimal structure. I think, actually, one person shared with me, the optimal one is always the one you don't have. I thought that was pretty smart. Honestly, there is no perfect one. There are drawbacks to each of them. Clearly, this is an issue. It has come up over and over. And I have heard a little bit about the sense of why that comes up, and it's because of the size and scope of this college. What I can tell you is that two things. One is, I know sometimes people are nervous about external deans. You're worried they're going to just come in and say, well, whatever I did in my old place, that's what we're going to do here. And at my institution, we have one dean and one associate dean, and the associate dean works primarily on undergraduate, and that's it. So that's not a structure that would in any way work here. And so it's not that I'm interested in, that I have this ideal structure in mind that would work here. What I would do in terms of strategy is, and it might be actually something that would have to happen fairly early, is really get feedback from, there's various faculty governance groups, and I've met with some of them, and you can fill in the faculty assembly and the executive council, and I apologize if I'm getting some of the specifics of the names wrong, but or educational policy committee, and talking with those about, so tell me what's not, what are the frustrations? Because it could be that the problems that people are having with this structure there might be other solutions other than rearranging. But if there was a really strong, compelling reason for restructuring, I'd be open to thinking about that as a possibility. But I don't have a vision of this is the ideal structure. But I absolutely hear loud and clear that that is something that faculty want discussed. And I don't even know if there's a consensus that it should be changed. What I do get a sense of that it should be discussed.
Of all the competing demands on your time as dean, where would fundraising fit in?
Well, you're underfunded. Talk about an obvious statement. It's pretty important. And I did speak with the provost about that I don't know about percentage of time, but it is an important feature. I've had some success with that in the English department in the context of alumni relationships. It's something I've enjoyed and been successful at, and the feedback that this college has been successful in that, and I think there's possibilities for even more growth there. So it absolutely would be a priority. How do you weigh that with all the other things that need to be done? That's the challenge of a faculty member's job. All the things you need to do, you got to weigh those. How do you do it? I don't know. You do it on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, but absolutely fundraising is an important part of the job, and it's one that I would welcome. I would be excited. So far today, I'm just incredibly impressed with this college, and I would love to have the opportunity to take the story out on the road and talk to alumni and find ways of strengthening the support for research and teaching and service here.
What is your interaction with staff? How are staff incorporated into the various administrative structures?
So I assume that question is in part about how it works on my campus, so I can give a few examples. I chair the His name is long, I apologize for that. It probably is Strategic Planning Resource Allocation or Advisory Council. It's a campus-wide council, which really, it's the highest level council on campus that advises the chancellor and the provost on big campus-wide issues. And one of the things that's important to me as chair on that committee, on that council, is that it's half faculty. There are administrators, there are students, both undergraduate and graduate, there are staff members, there are alumni, and that there's a recognition of the university. I mean, the balance is important, the primary voice is faculty, but it's absolutely essential at the highest level of planning to involve staff. So in my current work, campus-wide, I see that as central. On a local level, like, so there's the big picture and then there's the local level. I feel very strongly that staff have such a role in the experience of students. I mean, faculty are important. Obviously, staff are important, but the day-to-day of helping students navigate a large and complex system, staff often are the first lines of defense of, how do I do this? I don't know what to do, students' confusion. So I think staff, it's not the only thing staff do, but it's absolutely essential to the overall student experience. So for me, staff members are part of the team and contribute to the big planning. And there are some committees that are entirely faculty. There are other committees that are faculty and staff. And you have to find a structure that works for whatever particular issue you're addressing. But I think at many department levels, it's a mistake to leave, it absolutely is a mistake to leave staff out, because they often are the ones that implement the policies that faculty decide on, and they know the specifics of, well, there's this issue about you want to do it on the last, whatever the detail is, and then that structurally is impossible. So staff have to be crucial members of strategic planning and of a unit. So I'm very much have a team-oriented approach to that kind of involvement of students and faculty and staff, and when appropriate, alumni as well.
An Iowa legislature asks you, I understand about the relevance of the arts, but the humanities? Why do I need someone to tell me what to think when I read a book or watch a movie or listen to a piece of music? What do you say in response?
I would say first that I don't know anybody in the humanities that tells you what to think about a piece of literature or of art. That's not what we do. And in fact, what we do is facilitate conversations where people can debate difference of opinion about such matters. And that is an incredibly valuable skill. I certainly would talk to some of the things that I mentioned in my remarks about the value of humanities in terms of, so here, in terms of what? So that's a good question. Well, enriching one's life. Like, I believe in the practical, but the humanities enrich our lives. The arts do too, and so do the sciences. I love when scientists talk about a principle that it's beautiful. It's like poetry in the ways in which. But so the humanities, learning about the humanities enriches our lives, and we don't have to say that that's practical or useful. It's a powerful experience. So there's that. There's also the practical of developing these skills in writing and and oral communication, interpreting the complex world around us. Those are some of the things. Thinking historically, all of these things. This is a hard one for me to do short because I'm a humanist, so I tend to want to go on and on about the things that humanities. But I absolutely would emphasize that we don't teach students, this is what this Shakespeare play means. Is there anybody in the room that would do that? No, we don't do that. And so we're open to thinking about how has the meaning of this play changed over time? How have different people from different cultures interpreted it? How does this play work when it gets translated? We're all about the complexities of interpretation, not telling anyone what to think about a particular piece of literature or what to think about a historical event. So it's just not what we do. So I again use that as a moment to talk about, from my perspective, what it is that we actually do when we're in the humanities class.
So we'll give you a couple of moments for closing remarks, and then we invite you all to join us for a reception on the second level down the hall and to the left.
Great, thank you. So first of all, I do want to, it's been a long day, and I've met many of you, so it's nice to see some familiar faces, but I really want to thank the people that have taken the time both to come here and to meet with me. I am particularly appreciative of people's willingness to share the challenges, to put some hard issues on the table, and the passion and enthusiasm that you have for the college and for the university. So I really got a sense of that passion today, and I'm very grateful to many of you who came out. I know it's a very, very busy time of the semester, so I'm grateful for the day. And those of you who I'm going to meet tomorrow, I'll be all ready to go. I'm really excited about it. So what I thought I would do as closing remarks is tell you why I'm interested in this job at this school. Some of you have heard a version of this. My apologies to that, but I think, and it's actually different than what I planned because of what happened today. So one is why this. So I'm really going to focus on the why Iowa part. I mentioned this before, but as a leader, I can make decisions quickly when I have to, and there are hard decisions that you make without consensus. But I absolutely know I make better decisions when I have consultation, when I get feedback, when we hear from multiple perspectives, and when I get consultation not just with the people who I know agree with me. That's not a good way of getting consultation. So for me, choosing a university, of thinking about this, it's really important to think about a place where community matters and where there's a strong sense of shared governance and faculty commitment to collaboration in that way. And I have long had this, I've been in the Midwest, I've been at Illinois and then Missouri for 21 years, so I've been in the area, the neighborhood, so to speak, for a good long while. And I have long had the impression, partly because I know some people here, that Iowa is a place where community really matters. And I know that sounds a little corny and all, but I get that sense, I've gotten that sense today, that really matters to me. So that's important. I also, another thing is, I love interdisciplinary work, and I love thinking about innovations and honoring traditional things that we do, but also thinking about new ways. And I love the fact that, again, my perception of this place is you have a real reputation for innovation, about creating the MFA, among other things. And I really value that, but you're also not chasing every fad of higher ed, because it's things that are fads one day and then don't last. And so I think there's I love the cluster initiatives, and I'm excited about that, but in part because I know that you've been doing interdisciplinary work for a very long time. So if it's just getting on the bandwagon, I'm a lot less excited about it, but I think there's the foundations of that, the reason why I think that can be extraordinarily successful is because you have the foundations for that. So as someone really committed to interdisciplinary work, I'm thinking this is a good fit. And the last one, and this is one I'm going to tweak a little bit from what I actually had planned to talk about, is, so the general category is, I think I've always worked at a research one. Well, as a faculty member, I've only been at one place. But so I want to be at a research one university. I love that combination of research, teaching, and service. That's really important, particularly at publics, because I believe in accessible and affordable education. So public is important, research is important to me. But I think overall, many universities struggle with the balance between research and teaching, and I mentioned sometimes we really see those in tension. And I have long had the perception that Iowa is a place that students matter. And I don't want to name names, but I think there are institutions where sometimes the students get lost. And I'm not talking about my own institution, but I am talking that culturally, I think that's an issue with research universities. And that's not been my perception here, is that students really, the ideal situation for me is one in which attention to the students and attention to the research are the same, because the students are benefiting from the research experience. So the very final thing I want to end with is that, so at lunch today, I met a wonderful group of undergraduates. They were just terrific. And one of the things I asked them, I said, do you feel like you're at a research university? Is that a positive thing, a negative thing? What do you think about the research mission? I said, are you involved in the research mission? They practically jumped out of their chairs. They were so excited, every single one of them, including a freshman. They were all involved in various things across campus. And they talked about things, I was sharing this with Chris before. So One was in biochemistry, who talked about how, as a freshman, he's working in a lab in another major. And when I said that to Chris, you said, "Oh yeah," and I'm like, "But that wouldn't necessarily happen." And every single one of the students around the table all talked about a very specific research project, whether it was working in a lab or there was somebody from the humanities, all of them. And they talked about how they had to have the initiative. It wasn't just something that got handed to them. But every single one of them talked about that as a fundamental feature of being at Iowa. And it's one of the things that they most loved. And I have been asking that question to faculty at various points of the day of, are these two things interconnected and interdependent? And I've gotten answers that have been very positive, but there is nothing more convincing than hearing that from the students. And so that makes this a very appealing, I'm so impressed with what you're doing here, and I'd love the opportunity to see where else we could take the college. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming, and thank you, Professor Okker.